One of my favorite video game series, despite how much it's fallen off in recent installments, is the Command & Conquer series. No game series captures my childhood quite like this one. I remember the first time I happened upon the initial game, Command & Conquer, when I was 8 years old. It was unlike anything I'd ever encountered before, and I was immediately hooked. For this initial Hell March, we're going to discuss this groundbreaking game over the month, how it was good, how it was bad, and what it means to the gaming industry almost 30 years later. Command & Conquer, later subtitled Tiberian Dawn, is an early, real-time strategy game produced by Westwood Studios that depicts a near-future war between the Global Defense Initiative and the Brotherhood of Nod for world domination. I'll hold off in-depth discussion of the different factions for later videos, but we'll have some cursory information here. The Global Defense Initiative, or GDI, is a creation of the United Nations and acts as a global peacekeeping force fixated upon rooting out terrorist factions across the planet. The Brotherhood of Nod is a secretive terrorist operation led by an enigmatic figure, Cain. Torn between them is a world that is slowly being ravaged by an alien growth known as Tiberium, a substance that, due to its leaching of valuable minerals from the ground, is incalculably valuable to both factions' war efforts. It is both gift and curse. There are a couple of things that really set this game apart, particularly for its time period. The first is its innovative control system. Real-time strategy games at this point were pretty clunky to control, but Command & Conquer introduced a seamless point-and-click control system that allowed you to manage your resource use and asset production. The control pane to the right displayed all the tech tree options and expanded as the game went on and more tech structures were unlocked. Dragging a box around units and targeting different areas of the map for movement or enemies to be targeted made playing the game intuitive and fun. Another innovative feature for the game was its unit variety. In an era where most games like this would have had the same set of units with a different paint job, Command & Conquer did a lot of work to create unique units for both sides and really work on faction balance. As I said earlier, I'll hold off any in-depth discussion of the factions for later videos, but suffice it to say here that the unit variety in this game allowed them to make each faction truly different. If you know nothing about the two factions, you could infer a number of things about each side just through playing through the game and observing the units and technology available for each one. GDI, being funded by the United Nations, has the more advanced, more powerful units that cost more money and take more time to produce. Nod, as an underground terrorist organization, is forced to rely upon older, weaker units that cost less and are produced faster. GDI will pound you into oblivion, but Nod will overwhelm you with sheer numbers. The last defining feature of the game that really set it apart from its contemporaries is its extensive storyline, told through various forms. Right up front, most of the storytelling is done through the full-motion videos that serve as mission briefings, which depicts the player's higher-ups doling out information, background, and mission objectives. These SMV segments were directed by Joseph Kukan, one of the early leaders of the studio and the portrayer of Cain, who would return in similar positions in future installments, and starred members of the Westwood team. Through the course of the game, we see media manipulation resulted in funding cessation for GDI, which turns out to be a trick to manipulate Nod. On the Nod side, we see jealousy and subterfuge result in a failed coup and political machinations. The developers could have tacked on a bare-bones story to explain why these two factions were at war with each other and called it a day. The game would still have been revolutionary and made its mark on the genre and the industry, but Westwood went that extra mile to provide the player with a fully immersive gaming experience. While most of the story is told through these full-motion video segments, Westwood managed to impart story details through other means as well. I've already discussed how the building and units available for both factions details how each faction operates, with the powerful GDI and the conniving Nod. Another way the developers told the story was through the mission select screen. Before every mission, the player chooses where the next attack will go. Early in the game, there's usually only a single option, but as the game progresses further into the theater of war, the options increase. Before this decision is offered, the player is shown the progress made by their faction, as well as the progress made by the opposing faction. This translates to the player that this is a dynamic war with both sides gaining and losing territory on a daily basis, and makes the player feel integral to their faction's success. These multiple options also grant replayability for the game because each option leads to a different mission map, and sometimes even a different mission altogether. There was one particular Nod mission that I would do anything possible to avoid when I was a kid because I found it to be too difficult to figure out. None of these options impacted the ending of the game. Multiple game endings were still in early stages at this point. but it did provide a modicum of player control and added extra variety. One decision in the last mission of both factions does impact the ending of the game to an extent, but it's more in aesthetics than in actual substance. I'll discuss these variants in the faction-specific videos later. The final noteworthy thing about this game is the soundtrack, which is near universally praised for its combination of 90s grunge and industrial tones. Composed by Frank Klepacki, the soundtrack has an upbeat tempo to most of it, and it really fits the time period and tone of the game. It is unmistakably Command & Conquer. Just listen to it.
Ready and affirmative. Yes, sir. Moving out. Affirmative. Moving out. Yes, sir.
Command & Conquer sold over 1 million copies in its first year, being named the 4th best-selling CD-ROM product across all categories. By the time the game moved out of rotation, it had sold over 3 million copies worldwide, and nearly universally praised for its innovative playstyle and compelling story. In 1996, Westwood Studios released an expansion, Covert Operations, which we'll discuss in a video at the end of the month. Furthermore, it spawned a franchise that would include over 10 games across 3 different universes and would span 30 years of real time. Now, this is not to say the game does not have its problems. Its interface, while revolutionary at the time of its release, is limited when compared to recent titles. Memory limitations necessitated a 1 unit at a time production queue, requiring the player to dedicate near constant attention to which units were building and when. There was also some major limitations to the enemy AI that could be manipulated by experienced players to make the game impossible to lose. One of these manipulations is based upon the AI's use of airstrikes. GDI has access to airstrikes, and the enemy AI will always choose to airstrike the unit that is the most northwest, so the observant player will simply station a lone soldier out in the middle of nowhere and wait for that poor guy to be annihilated by a surgical napalm strike. Then, the player will order another soldier to the same location to await his dire fate. Another issue with the AI is how it registers sandbag walls. The game's AI does not see sandbag walls as enemy structures or impediments, and thus will not attack them without reason. So, the crafty player can build a path of sandbag walls across the map and then outside the entrance to the enemy's base, effectively walling them off from leaving it. Then, the player can build up an overwhelming force, using their monopoly over all the Tiberium on the map, and crush the enemy when they're ready. This game will not be for everyone, just as it wasn't for everyone when it first came out. However, if you enjoy real-time strategy games and enjoy retro games, I would highly recommend Command & Conquer if you haven't played it already. I would also recommend this game for anyone who is interested in the evolution of games across time, especially when you're able to play something like this alongside one of the newer installments. Seeing where games have been allows us to appreciate where we are now, and Command & Conquer is the perfect game to do this with. It's a great game with an excellent story that holds the seeds for what will eventually be even more excellent games down the road. The remastered version is available on Steam as of now, so it's definitely worth checking out. We'll continue Hell March next week by discussing the heroes of the story, the Global Defense Initiative. What's your favorite real-time strategy game? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching.